the man of the hour, Mr. Robert DeRego.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so a couple questions. A lot of questions because it's an interview, I guess. So, who is Robert DeRego? You're running for supervisor for District 1. Why?
You know, I had gone to some supervisor meetings probably about 8 years ago, and basically just to bring the point to them that you know, it's not a local thing; it's a statewide and even nationwide to some extent thing. But the economy for a private sector wage earner was slipping. You know, and at the time I was working at ShopSmart, closing the evenings there, managing that. And my wife was working, running a gas station in the graveyard, you know. And, you know, you start to see how sustainable or unsustainable, you know, that sort of lifestyle is, even pulling in, you know, 80 hours. It's pretty tough to pay your bills. And I just saw them going at it this year, and to be honest, nobody wrote me back. I wrote everybody back about my concerns, and Roger wrote me back, and Rick Hawley from the city council wrote me back. And it was just clear that nobody was going to mention poverty. You know, Roger was going to mention continuing to pick up trash, and Catherine was going to mention getting along with everybody, and I appreciate that. But no one was going to mention, you know, that we're the poorest community in the state. You know, which I was kind of surprised to find out when I finally, you know. And so that was basically it. I figured it was a chance to kind of say poverty a few times and at a relatively inexpensive cost.
So you did just mention your opponents, and we were talking about that earlier before you got in the studio. How do we ask Rob DeRego about how he feels about his opponents? So I guess that's really the question.
How do I feel about them? Mm-hmm. You know, Roger's. You know, I mean, I wouldn't be hanging out with Roger, but I like Catherine, actually. You know, you know, nobody, you know, she didn't write me back, and so I just wanted to, you know, all I wanted to do was, you know, I was going to kind of get behind and support Catherine, to be honest, and I just wanted to make sure that she kind of was on the page of, you know, actually talking about some of her topics, and you know, conceptualizing some plans, and you know, to be honest, I went the last day and got all my signatures in about 3 hours. And
goes to show you about how big District 1 is there.
I just went in my own neighborhood there, and stayed right around my house, and you know, I gave everybody that to that point to kind of fill out if anybody was going to use that as part of their platform, and nobody did. So I just said, you know what, we're going to wait 4 more years to have this conversation.
I think it's a bit surprising, it really is. We hear, you know, Roger Gatlin's plan to kind of clean up a little bit, but I'm like you. I'm kind of surprised that poverty has not been talked about a lot, at least in the kind of the platform of any real candidate. Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, we have hotels, and they're dependent upon a poor person to work those jobs. Not too many people will take those to go term beds seasonally. Mm-hmm. But we get occupancy tax, you know, and that's a pretty big part of our general fund. And, you know, to be honest, it's a lot of special interest. There's the tourism industry. It's a special interest, you know, and it gets quite a bit of attention from our leaders, and yet it does not make a sustainable industry. And, you know, we even have the Board of Realtors. All these they're all special interests, and they're all going after what they want, you know. And the easier way to, I guess, to fix a lot of these problems would be to outprice a poor person and get them out of the community, rather than making a stronger, lower-end wage earner that then raises your property prices and achieves people's goals, you know, with everybody on the same boat.
Right.
I guess it's more difficult.
So, what's your plan to tackle poverty in Del Norte County, specifically District 1? Well,
you know, honestly, it's my own little thing, but I grow a little bit of cannabis for myself, and over the time I've realized, you know, if I was legally able to, with my little 100 square feet, I probably could have raised 50 grand a year easily. And so you start to look at that, and I did the numbers, and we have 4,000 acres of lilies. So I figured out what 40 acres of cannabis would do indoors.
Right.
And it would be hundreds of millions of dollars, you know. I looked into what the state is going to consume, and based on Oregon's numbers, it's $7 billion that we'll consume from within ourselves. a market that we cannot, that won't be there won't be competition from Oregon and Washington. Like we do at Dungeness. Well, there's competition from Oregon and Washington in that market. And so if we could take 1% of the state market, that would be about $70 million a year, about twice what our crabbing revenue used to be anyways. And I'd like to take some of, we'd like to tax the grower to distributor, place a tax in there, and plan for the future for when supply and demand makes the margins on cannabis fall. But actually look at what we want for sustainable living. I think like we could have a mill. There's different. We could certainly start looking at maybe getting our kids to graduate with the ability to do website development and things like that. But in the meantime, we do have to make a living as adults, and so with Roger, with picking up trash, and his basic thing is to beautify the community, and then more people will visit us. But at a certain point, it's kind of like bailing your boat, and at a certain point, you have to decide, is this bailing going to work, or should I just go right to the hole and plug the damn hole? And I think he's going to keep bailing, but we do need to repair the.
It's kind of a difference between doing trash pickups or just building a damn trash can to throw the stuff away in.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that something? I see. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to point out is that personally, at least, I'm a very big supporter of legalizing cannabis of sorts, but it's also all forms of hemp plants that are not legally able to be grown across the United States. There's a huge industry of like possible textiles, biofuels, clothes, all sorts of industries that opened up if hemp plants are legalized, not simply recreational marijuana use. And I just want to give you some credit due where I think credit is due there. I very much support it, and I think you've got a very great idea for bringing in some revenue.
We don't all have to use cannabis.
Tyler's been smoking his socks.
No siree.
Jim Beam's produced in a county that's dry in Kentucky, and now I think it's a little bit of a marginalization for folks that use cannabis for any reason to say that a drunk can go to a bar. And I do say drunk because I don't use alcohol, and I do marginalize an alcoholic, but 2/3 of us drink, and we have parking lots for it. And as far as what's causing the deaths on our roads, what's causing the deaths in our communities that are preventable, it's on our roads, and half of it is distracted driving, and half of it is drunken driving.
That kind of reminded me of something Bob Berkowitz said at the forum, that one of his big concerns was people driving on last chance grade while under the influence of marijuana. Did you hear that? And kind of like, what was running through your head when you heard what he had to say about that?
Again, it's a form of marginalization, and there's people who use cannabis that it truly is benefiting their life, and there's people that are using it as it's addictive and it's a bit of a vice. But it's not going to help anybody to further to marginalize them, And I thought we had Bob on our team. I'd actually contacted Bob, and the only problem he had was insurance, but I think they brought up that too, whether we were insurable.
He did bring,
Or was that Roger?
That was Bob that brought that up.
Yeah. One further thing I wanted to mention is that Mr. Finnegan had mentioned that it's not very appealing to possible employers when our workers are working stoned. Loosely quote, of course. If your plans for marijuana legalization became legal, what sort of regulations do you think would need to be set in place for this to become a veritable industry that has regulations and taxes and protocols?
As far as consumption at work, I'm not really sure. Do we have laws for alcohol? And for the most part, I think that's just up to a company. This guy looks drunk today, and it's time to go.
Yeah, almost a copy paste of sorts.
Yeah, so certainly, if you're driving a bus, that might be a good profession to say, we're going to drug test and
Can I propose a regulation? David Finnegan has to take a bong rip before every county supervisor meeting.
I don't see what would be the problem with that, to be honest.
Question for you, this kind of expanding on what Tyler had to say. Do you think that there should be strict regulations on going to work high? Do you think that should be a government-imposed regulation or just kind of an employee?
No, it's up to the we have our sheriff gets sued constantly. It's kind of up to them, I guess, whether they're going to deal with that. So that's up to an employer to decide, what their risk, tolerance is. As far as I have forklifts, and I might get sued if one of my employees is stoned and crushes the other one with a forklift,
Right.
But I think that's something that, should be considered from the business end, other than in government work, Obviously, it's their responsibility to make sure they maintain a safe work atmosphere, but, yeah.
Now, I want to kind of move into a bit of a topic that I know you're going to want to jump on, Alex. The drug war. Do you think the current prohibition of marijuana and just most drugs, do you think, in short, do you think it hurts or benefits the economy?
Well, it hurts the economy, and and it's counterproductive, I believe. And I think most of us are starting to come to that conclusion. We have drugs. I worked at Walgreens, and in a lot of countries, the drugstore is open on holidays, and the only one working is a pharmacist. But in our country, the pharmacist has the day off, and we're there for $10 an hour pitching jugs of vodka. So we have that drug there, and now that tobacco is not so popular, we have other drugs for them to chew to stop using tobacco. And this is a store that sells medicine for your health, Yeah. In fact, they ask you for a wellness card, So, I think that's kind of where I stand on that is we have drugs, Starbucks serves as a drug, and it's quite sustainable. The people seem to be able to keep their jobs. On the other hand, the little kids picking the coffee, aren't doing so well. And honestly, again, I've worked in that kind of industry too, and they go through a lot of toilet paper, so you can't tell me that the coffee doesn't have adverse side effects.
One question I'd like to ask you, I had the privilege of asking the same question to a couple of the other candidates at the forum. Other countries like Canada have put measures in place that they have stopped treating many drug offenders like criminals, and they've started treating them like victims. Whereas instead of sending them to jail and confiscating their stuff, instead they would send them to rehab, educate them of the dangers of what their behavior might bring about, and instead they have much stricter punishments for drug dealers. What are your thoughts on this sort of principle, and would it benefit our area?
Can I do that one first?
Yeah,
if you don't mind. So the most adverse side effect of the war on drugs, when it was declared by Richard Nixon in 1970, is mass incarceration. What you see today is that it's just an exponential growth of the prison population. And once the war on drugs really picked up in the 1980s to combat crack addiction and crack use, like you saw, not only like the use of drugs not decline, but other violent crimes increased.
Skyrocketed.
And all that did was that, combined with mandatory minimum sentencing and 3 strikes laws, just explodes the prison population. You want to talk about unsustainability. I mean, California literally was dinged by the Supreme Court for having overcrowded prisons, which is now it just means violent offenders, or, well, not violent offenders, but now it just means that people that should be in prison are going to be in county jails.
To further sort of staple onto what you were saying about mass incarceration, as of 2015, the end of 2015, that is, the United States has the most incarcerated individuals across the planet, more than China, which is a very crazy statistic to think about.
Last thing that I would add is that this is mostly African-American men that are going to prison.
Yes.
So there is a racial component to this as well. And John Ehrlichman, the chief domestic advisor to President Nixon, and also chief Watergate mastermind, has said, and it's on the record, that the entire intent of the war on drugs was to zero in and associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then from there they could use this notion that these people are selling drugs or using drugs to go and raid their homes, tap their phones, and of course make arrests for practically no reason.
Yes, very polarizing topics indeed, but important nonetheless. Back to you. What do you think about these proposed policy changes that would prevent these possibly unnecessary incarcerations?
From the small town perspective, we certainly can talk about it, but obviously when we get too progressive, then we become socialists in a lot of people's views. But
Yeah. Oh, are we on the air right now? I didn't mean to say that in public.
If you ask me, it's something the government should actually take control of. So we have lots of people that are not making enough money, and so they become drug dealers, And so we have drugs actually available. I'm sure every block here you can go buy yourself whatever you like. If we had a government, maybe the Social Security department, or if they were to kind of take over there, then and get everybody what they were addicted to, essentially, it would. If you look at countries that have kind of went with this model, they've reduced their harms by essentially by not turning drug addicts into drug dealers, and keeping drug addicts maintained and not seeking financial resolution, so making it basically affordable. And I do believe that there is a part of the terrible part of drug addiction, depending on what drug you're talking about, at least 40% of it is the cost of the drug, and then what people do to get it, and so at least it's a harms reduction if you can mitigate some of the and keep the numbers of people turning to dangerous addictions down.
Right. No, I kind of want to talk a little bit on the topic of legalization, and again, furthermore, on just kind of the whole drug realm, I suppose. With legalization, people usually say, okay, let's just legalize marijuana and just leave the rest alone. What do you think? Does legalization end with marijuana, or should all drugs be legalized?
Make life more interesting, if not shorter.
I have a unique perspective, and I come from it from an addict's perspective. I've spent a couple of years addicted to other drugs, and whiskey was one of them. And in the last 12 or 13, 14 years, I've knocked all of them off, except for cannabis. And I'd hate the idea of my kids trying these drugs and that sort of thing. And then on the other hand, this is life. You're going to have chances where you're going to make stupid decisions, and hope maybe you can make a better decision. So I do believe that the right thing is I don't believe they should be criminalized. A drug problem is a health problem between a person, their family, and their physicians. Preferably, I think that's the best way to handle it.
It doesn't become a public safety problem until Bob Berkowitz starts driving, and then everybody's got to be stoned.
That's what gets me is they bring up safety and all this, and it's like, yeah, we put over half our general fund into the sheriff, so it doesn't leave us a whole bunch to play with for trying to subsidize getting a little better education, putting into our infrastructure. But again, the most dangerous thing we're doing really right now, and especially in California, that they find that states that regulate cannabis actually. Alcohol goes from being the biggest killer, and it becomes distracted driving. And I have been verified.com, and I'm sorry, but one of the fellows I'm working with, has that I'm running against has a ticket for using a cell phone, behind the wheel, So, so if we're just looking at safety and trying to improve outcomes, we just need to cover up the parking lots at the bars, I think,
I'd like to sort of veer just a slight little bit off topic, still on the topic of drug use and whatnot. You mentioned that you've knocked everything off the list as far as your addictions have gone, and that you certainly wouldn't want your children trying any of the things. Unfortunately, drug use amongst the youth is a very prevalent issue in Donut County, one that, at least amongst the three of us, I'm sure, is very near and dear to our hearts. What would you do to get rid of this widespread drug use amongst the young people in Donut County, and what sort of side effects do you think that it would have if it was done, that more awareness or prevention was put in place?
And if I might kind of add on to it, do you think that the intense regulations and prohibition of marijuana, do you think that kind of adds the kind of a taboo factor? And it kind of, that increases to the youth, I just want to smoke a weed.
Well, young people like to, there's a little bit of a rebel factor if people want to do their own thing, so that I think does play something into it. As far as, helping with addiction and youth, that's a real for me, I went to 12-step meetings. You know, you have to discover you have a problem, you know, and then you have to decide that you want to do something about it, you know. It's unfortunately very, you know, keeping drugs from kids at school, I don't think we're going to do it better with harsher penalties, you know, I can tell you that.
Like the war on drugs for a perfect example.
Yeah.
You know, kids do better in families that have time for their kids, you know, and, you know, being honest with your children, you know, about dangers. If you look at tobacco, our use of tobacco is actually down. And the only thing we're doing is saying, hey, you know, grandma's black lung, you want that? You know, she's hacking, you know, so we're just being honest about it, you know. And it's having a positive result. In Del Norte, you know, some of our problems we have, including crime and addiction in youth, is actually, as bad as it looks, is actually it's not as bad as a lot of communities that have the poverty factors we have, you know. It's a tough one because there's a lot of parents that aren't, I mean, if you're being real honest about it, that aren't even fit parents, you know. And if you want to find the root of it, you know, geez, you'll be digging for a while, I imagine.
Yeah. One thing that you further elaborated on in your talk at the candidate forum was that you were a very big advocator of parents spending more time with their children, having jobs that allowed them to do so. That very much seems like that's playing into what you're talking about now, where parents, you know, it's their responsibility to educate their children properly and warn them about the dangers and all that. How do you think that we could go about accomplishing that in Del Norte County?
Can I add an amendment to that question?
Go for it.
That was on our pre-prepared questions. The county has finally adopted a children's budget, which is basically a 7-page outline of all the money that the county has allocated to programs that will directly impact children. So found in the children's budget is the $80,235 the county has spent this year on recreation and development, which is about half of what they say it's going to cost, which is at $161,240. So is that too little or too much, and could that money maybe be spent somewhere else? And I guess going along with Tyler's question, you know, where does the community and the parents factor into the children's budget?
You know, where do we the budget? Yeah, that's too little to do much of anything about. You know, and you know, I mean, what are we talking about? Are we going to go to, you know, there's not many good options when you have, you know, and I've seen it before in my youth where young people are living with addicted parents and they're becoming addicts themselves complicitly with their parents. You know, and you know, I mean, then you're talking about a problem with CPS, and everybody's got a problem. You know, I mean, nobody wants to go and say this parent, you know, is an unfit parent, you know. The money, you know, it's really unfortunate. I can't say that I have a plan, you know, that would solve, you know, addiction. I would think a long route, you know, of having an income and having.
You mean you don't have a 5-year plan?
I don't have a 5-year plan for youth addiction. No, I mean, you know, this is something where, you know, kids are running around, and they, you know, if you have a parent that you're, you know, that's keeping you directed in your life, or a mentor, you know, you're in such a better place. But if you're, you know, if you don't have that, you know, it's hard, you know. So once we catch on and there's a chance to do something about that, you know, it's probably, you know, kind of too late, you know. So financially, we need to build stronger families, you know. It's, you know, again, the 12-step meetings I went to, and they don't help everybody, you know. And then if you're a youth, I imagine that's a much more complex, you know. I mean, once you're an adult, you realize I'm not accomplishing what I'm supposed to. I'm not, you know, this isn't how it's supposed to be. You know, for a young person, you know, your parents always tell you, you know, what you think you know it all kind of thing. And, you know, that goes on probably till you're at least 40, I would guess. You know? And so, you know, it's, you know, that's a really good question, and it's a tough, I imagine, a real complex, long arching answer.
Right. Now, kind of on the same topic of that, with youth and kind of family issues, I suppose. What would you identify as the biggest hurdle for youth success in Del Norte County?
The biggest hurdle, you know, when I was young, I was raised in the Sacramento area, and I'd say the one thing we did have there were some jobs, so when I had a job, I knew I could go to the next one. And so eventually I was at Hewlett Packard just through a temp agency, but there's an expanding horizon in front of you, and here you don't have that too much. So the more we can engage children, to find what they're calling, like you guys here at the radio station, you guys are engaged, you found a meaningful occupation, the more that we can offer that, and there's a lot of programs that do try and reach out, with opportunities for youth to become engaged in positive ways. From 4-H, on, there's plenty of ways. Again, it comes down to needing a good parental unit, a good mentor, good guardians to get you there.
That's what I found is that just connections. I mean, obviously, that's my dad right there. Like, he's a great parent, but outside of the home as well, like just good connections to good programs with healthy adult mentors, where their purpose in life and their mission is to invest back into young people. So it's, not just professionalism for them, but it's really what their life's work is all about. I think Ron Cole with Gateway Education would be a big, somebody that's done that for me. Eric Apperson, the sheriff and Explorers, somebody that's wants to make that investment in young people, simply to make the investment in young people because it's important, not for any other kind of goal or motive, but just because they recognize that, you invest big now, you get big a lot farther down the road.
And now I kind of want to touch back a little bit how you said that back in Sacramento, a lot of the youth had jobs. And that's kind of how they occupied a lot of their time.
I don't know about jobs, but there was always some, so if you started at a sandwich shop, you were quickly finding out about the next place down the road that was hiring for the next step up,
Right.
Clear path.
Now, there was somewhere to go,
Would you say that there's kind of a struggle in Del Norte County, like youth unemployment? Do you think it's kind of hard for youth to get into the workforce here?
I would say just as far as seeing again, I moved up here, 13 years ago. So from the perspective of being raised here, I'm a little alien, but I would guess that, we have hunters, obviously we have different interests up here, right? Mm-hmm. Fishermen and all that sort of thing. And so those are positive, relatively to some of the things you could be into. But, I hear it over and over again from people, in the neighborhoods that that's all they had to do, and I don't feel that way. But then again, you appreciate kind of what you didn't have. So I can, feel quite lost in what there is to do here. But I imagine how do you feel about it? Were you born here?
I wasn't born here, but I've lived here for most of my life. I'm not sure if youth unemployment is a huge issue, or if I was struck with a lot of bad luck and no one calling me back when I put in an application. So I don't know if that's kind of a real big issue with everyone else, because my friend just got a job, but I'm not entirely sure.
So I am born and raised, turned 20 this June, and
happy birthday.
Yeah, so
happy
2 decades in the county now, and I'd say youth unemployment just goes hand in hand with a lack of healthy adult mentors. So potentially, your employer could be that healthy adult mentor for you, but if they're not, hiring young people, then obviously young people are going to miss out on every opportunity that would come with having a job, including skills development. So I think in schools, that could be a big place where you start to see job training. We have a prison, and the prison is one of the biggest employers in the community. There are no classes at the high school that, let alone like our pathways to getting a job at the prison or anything in the criminal justice field. There's no, office management type classes or just how to use an office. And there's really a lack of emphasis on life skills. People complain that they never teach you how to do your taxes in school, which is it's not true. I remember being in economics class and we filled out a W-2 form, but they don't teach you when you should mow your lawn. They don't teach you how to change your oil in your car. And these are things that, they're, fairly, innate, but still it would help to have somebody show you the first time.
I want to cut you off just a little bit right there.
Please do.
I just graduated last year. My sister is going through the Donor High School right now, and they have a very similar class to what you're promoting here. I don't know exactly what it's titled. I think it's like Life on Your Own or something similar to that.
Yeah,
where they're
Castle Rock.
Yeah, where they're teaching kids, how to, do your laundry, simple stuff like that, to how to pay your taxes, how to have like a, easily workable but healthy sort of, diet on a budget, how to pay your bills through college, stuff like that. Which just immediately when I heard about that, I was envious, because that was one of my exact complaints, was that, in high school, they don't teach you how to live your life. They just teach you some skills that may or may not be useful depending upon what you want to do.
We did a lot of that kind of stuff in my health class. Like, we balanced a checkbook in my health class, but that was freshman year. And then we got back into it a little bit in economics senior year. So there's that 2-year gap where there's really no kind of skills or trainings or anything like that. So I think consistent investment in youth and consistent development is what's missing.
I want to get to our next major buzz question, so to speak. What do you think separates you from the other candidates? What do you offer that they don't?
I think I'm probably, I would consider myself just a little bit more abrupt and honest, as far as, I went to one forum and I'd been talking to these guys for some time about the cannabis issue, and it came out that they're going to be dealing with it in June, after the election, wink, wink, And so just on the small scale, these people are unwilling to, the night that the city banned cannabis cultivation, they also kind of just shuffled and stuffed under, an imperfect shelter, addressing. So, the shelter is not popular enough for them to appropriately address, on an election year anyways. And so I would think that, I'm not really concerned about, at least about being elected. My only, I figure I'm going to walk away with maybe a little less than a fifth of the vote. But I figure the one thing I can bring is that they're not going to be able to kind of talk about soliciting visitors, I would prioritize inner growth, so we were always trying to talk about growth, and that means getting a new fella up here to work at the prison. A lot of the time that's kind of where they're at, and they get to sell a house and they make a little money, but we have a smaller average wage when that happens, because all of a sudden we have one more person, but the jobs were the same. That job was already existing. Yep. So we end up with this smaller average wage, and we're focusing a little bit too much on growth without narrowing down the term of what we want for that growth. So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to bring to the table. For me, I be honest, tourism bugged me, and I like tourism, and I'll be honest, I was a tourist, that's why I found the place. I love it up here. And but someone who works in that industry for $10 an hour doesn't go to the fireworks show. They don't go to they don't go do any of the fun events. If the ships are coming, they're probably working. So all the little benefits and fun things about working in a small town, as far as the industry they're promoting, are lost on the people that will work it. And so if we end up with this tourist industry and it works out as well as they want it to, in Yosemite, that raises, I think, about $350 to $400 million additionally for the economy. And so that would double our economy. That would double our GDP, and then some a little bit. And then they would get more in their general fund, and we could spend on youth programs and all this sort of thing. But we still need a $10 an hour employee. Now we have tons of more positions for poor people that we're going to need to fill with poor people. We're almost going to have to resolicit some more impoverished people to come take these positions. I don't see tourism as ever being a year-round thing here. Unless global warming really works out for us. I don't see. I just don't see it. And I have a shop, so I watch it, and I tell you what, the day that all the kids go back to school is the day it's over. Because that's what inspires the road trip. So if you a 3-month industry, great. for your occupancy tax, great for the business owner, great for me, I appreciate it. But I'm not going to pretend it's going to happen in December, and I'm not going to pretend that anybody's going to get a nice job out of it that's going to be a year-round kind of gig.
One thing that you seem to continually be going back to is that you're very much not against these sort of Band-Aid solutions, but you're looking sort of past that. Like you want to get the consistent year-round programs going. You want to find something consistent that's not just a Band-Aid fix. Like you mentioned, Mr. Gatlin's plans to take the bite out of blight and by cleaning things up. But you mentioned that that's not a long-term solution. It's going to continue to be a problem. Instead of building a trash can, like Alex said, you're just cleaning up.
Can I just say real quick, I actually don't think Rob has said take a bite out of blight once the whole interview. But that shows how good Roger Gitlin is then, right? Like you could say it for him.
It sounds so catchy.
It is catchy.
It's very catchy.
I've talked to Mike at Daily Bread, and he tells me that one of his guys came up with bite out of blight, but then Roger gives it a different story. I'm not sure.
Roger Gitlin's an entirely different story.
It's the concept. We know what we're talking about.
I kind of want to ask a question that's kind of a little bit off topic, but then again, still kind of goes back towards the youth involvement in local elections, but also just youth involvement. How do you plan on incorporating the youth voice in our community and partner with local youth in a meaningful way in order to build a better Delnort?
It's a good question. I didn't even think about the youth so much. No, no. But
Look to your right.
that's just it. Education is the ultimate uplifter. Whether you're getting it from someone that's with you every day, a good parent, or whether you're getting it at school, it's education. And so if you're going to have this fixed in 20 years, it's going to have to come with a two-sided solution. With the solution that gets parents to work and kids, coming out 18 years old and relatively healthy, body and mind, for sure. Now, as far as how to bring youth's voice, we have CASA. That's one way that, that unfortunately once it's kind of too far gone, that youth get a voice. And so it comes to getting there, to solving it before it gets that far. Again, it's a long-term solution, but I would encourage everybody to be as active as you guys are in politics, because it is that reason. When I go around my neighborhood and nobody's registered to vote, so it becomes pretty apparent why we don't have yields and stop signs at our four-way intersections in the middle of our neighborhood. But of course, Front Street's going to get some attention to be rehabilitated. And we don't have street lights between the corridors of the schools. It becomes very, very evident. So if your generation doesn't show that you're watching, and you're, have a pragmatic expectation, then, of course, we're going to keep kind of trucking on from the perspective of realtors and hotel owners and,
Did you want to talk a little bit about that one triplicate article on the unspent housing money?
Yes. It was the April 28th edition, I think the day of the candidates forum. The triplicate article, Unspent Housing Money Options, explained that the Department of Health and Human Services is sitting on $416,000 of, unspent money. So
they're at the point now, I think they've waited so long that they have to roll it over onto a new, what is it called? California. I need an acronym. But
local government support something like that.
Yeah.
So should the county even use this money or?
Oh yeah. And that's the thing is, if you look at the mental health budget, about a third of it's salaries. And I'm not going to say that we shouldn't, I'm not going to say that's wrong or right. But as far as, we need a shelter that's going to be functional and year-round. And there's one guy who does it every year when it's needed, and it's his whole goal is to have a year-round functional shelter. And mental health, all of them are local, have mental health issues, or veteran. If you combine those three statistics, you're going to have a hard time finding people that don't meet those criterias. And I've talked to Mike over there. I think his budget's about $250,000 a year, and he'd be willing to relocate his thrift shop, which helps him raise money for, I guess, about 150 dinners a night, 6 nights a week. And he needs some emergency exits, a couple emergency exits. He needs some sprinklers to become not just an emergency shelter. And then from there, we need like a family transitional,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're separating from mental health now.
So I actually didn't, I didn't read the end of my question, and that's why I'm like, so the question actually was, focus on developing existing programs or introduce new programs. And I mean, you've touched on a little bit of it. Like,
I would say that as far as the budget for mental health, it's several $1 million a year in our county. And so you could see, $400,000 doesn't sound like it's going to go too far. And I think that we need to take this chance. And I've heard, I can't remember who it was, but one of the candidates the other night said, it would be irresponsible to build something that you couldn't maintain. But if we don't build it, it's just going to, it'll be eaten up, and you're not going to see nothing for it. And I'm not, Mike, and we need to get a bigger board of stakeholders. I tried to talk to Barbara, but she's no longer there, that runs human services over there. So we need to get the stakeholders together and really find out what's going to be the best way to deal with this. But we have to get something out of it this time. Mike said that he would, that he thinks he could operate it for 125 additionally a year. So the state's pledging an additional 100. You can't depend on that. I'm not sure if we'd want to do like a sublease the building, or how we would kind of work that out with him. But we need the resource now. We've lost several people since I've been up here to the cold, and
I think the debate in the community so far has been like either like all or nothing. Like, we either are going to have transitional housing for homeless, and we're going to have all these wonderful programs, or we're going to have none of it. And I'm kind of hearing, well, why don't we just have some of it?
Even if we
find out the most important sums of it and make sure to include those first.
Right. Even if we had to take part of the shelter and make it so it was just for, which gets kind of weird because you have money for veterans, you have money for mentally disabled, but you can't, it gets hard to use it, in a collective fashion that nails down all of your points here. But so even if he had to use part of the shelter to just service, it would be a great benefit to him, who's not seen anything from the county, to have sprinklers and the emergency exits, and so even if it has to be that's all he's going to be helping in a certain part of it, it will greatly expand his infrastructure, and rather just throwing it into the wind, which I kind of think, and I'm for a bigger government in a lot of ways, but when you see the $3 million and then the $400,000, it becomes apparent that we need to try and get something that we're going to see for that $400,000, Yeah.
All right. Shall we move to the next question?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Did you attend the recent economic summit?
Wow,
I didn't. No, I stayed away.
you and me both.
It was conducted by the Chamber of Commerce, and we need to be looking at economy from a wage earner's perspective. Anything else, I think, is a special interest. I didn't go get cannabis money when I ran, and I don't think these people should be going and getting, these business owners that obviously, so these are all special interest, and so I think there were some interesting things said, because I did read some transcripts from some of the stuff, but one fellow was talking about trying to get us to write all kinds of grants from town. So there's some interesting concepts maybe we could bring in, for sure. But I didn't go to the economic summit.
For the most part, the general outlook. The general outlook was very positive, and people were typically very optimistic. Would you say that you share this sort of sentiment?
No. So we're raising. How many jobs did we bring in last year? I think it was about a dozen. And how many people graduated? So, and then we look at the wage, the average wage. So yeah, we're getting all this extra revenue. Our budget went up over 20% last year, but the average wages went down 20%. So, if we're looking at economy,
It's almost like
how
you
a
can
family's
visually
functioning.
see where the money went, in a sense.
Yeah, so we've lost wages, and the jobs aren't, near keeping up with our own community's growth, So you can say we, our tourism numbers look a little bit better, but as far that's what I'd like to change is how we look at the economy. It has to transfer over to what does your salary look like, wage earner. Most of us don't own businesses. Most of us are employees at jobs, And so I think, the economy from a government's perspective needs to be on the people who are most there working hourly wages,
One thing from the Economic Summit that very much ties into what you were saying about youth employment, Jeff Harris, the superintendent of the school district, very much was in favor of promoting internships at businesses. And he very much was promoting that businesses should take in a youth, just pay them even minimum wage, have them work, 10 hours a week. But just the work experience and the mentorship and even just the, bits of money that they make is such a positive influence that it's very much worth the investment in the community, which very much ties back into what you were saying about how it's important for youth to have that, first little job with the next step available and strong, like adult allies and role models to build themselves off of. So it very much seems that you and Mr. Harris have not conflicting ideals in this topic. Shall we move to our next topic?
Yeah, actually I don't have another topic. I wanted to take a quick break. Just you're listening to the T-Smash show on kfugradio.org if you're listening online or locally at 101.1 FM. This has been it's not over yet, but just you've been listening to an interview with Robert DeRego. And a car alarm, I guess. Candidate for supervisor for District 1. Joining with me is also Tyler.
Hello.
And Alex.
Thanks for having me.
And here are a couple special words from our underwriters, I think. Sure. Okay.
You're listening to KFUG, Crescent City, 101.1 FM, and online at kfugradio.org. Community radio for Crescent City, Del Norte County, and beyond. KFUG.
Life is busy and fast. It can be difficult to take your favorite community radio station with you on your daily adventures of daring do. Well, fret no more, radio listeners. Now you can take KFUG along with you on your mobile device of choice, thanks to TuneIn.com. Simply go to TuneIn.com, download the free and safe app, look up KFUG in their directory, and away you go. Community radio bliss. TuneIn.com lets you take KFUG with you wherever you go. Community radio for Crescent City, Del Norte, and now, truly, beyond KFUG.
What would a teenager who is frustrated and concerned about the direction our country is heading do with a 2-hour radio show? That's a good question. On my show, I talk about political topics, social issues, recent news, and everything in between. I also play a little bit of music. If you're tired of your average political talk show that only bashes on Republicans or only on Democrats, then I would encourage you to tune into my show, because neither party is safe from my criticism. I believe our nation is facing great issues, and both Republicans and Democrats are responsible for the mess that we're in. If you've ever wondered what a teenager likes to complain about politically, then I'm the show for you. Tune in for the T-Smash Show every Monday from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock at 101.1 FM or online at kfugradio.org. I am T-Smash, and I approve this message.
The unusual world of music plays every hour, every day on Web Radio KFUG, channel 1943, 56 and 2/3. High quality, experiment-free track sound, smellorama, and soon 3D audio were available. Don't touch that dial.
Hi, this is Mary Dorman, your local State Farm agent, with a reminder to not text and drive. Did you know teens are 4 times more likely to crash than other drivers? For more tips about teen driving safety, go to marydorman.com and search for teen driving.
State Farm Insurance Agent and KFUG Underwriter, Mary Dorman. There's a reason she's won the Triplicate's Reader's Choice Awards for Best Insurance Agent 3 years in a row. Contact Mary at 707-464-2414 or online at marydorman.com. And thanks, Mary, for supporting KFUG Community Radio. Support for KFUG Community Radio comes from State Farm Insurance Agent Mary Dorman. Mary's office is located at 490 L Street in Crescent City at the corner of 5th and 101 South. You can reach Mary at 464-2414 or online at marydorman.com. For all your insurance needs, call State Farm Insurance Agent and KFUG Underwriter, Mary Dorman. Thanks, Mary.
You're listening to the T-Smash Show, still on kfugradio.org online, or 101.1 FM. Joining me in studio is Robert DeRego with a couple of my friends, Alex and Tyler.
Hello.
Now, we have just a couple more questions, and then we'll be pretty much finished. Tyler or Alex, I'm not sure who wanted to ask the question. Tyler.
All right, I'll take it away then.
All right.
Thank you very much, Taylor. So one topic that is very rarely addressed across the country, I'd say, not just on a local level, is the lack of birth control and sex education that's provided in public schools. Oftentimes it's, mediocre at best, which can lead to high rates of, STDs amongst youth, teen pregnancy and whatnot, not due to, those rascally youth. It's just a lack of education, for a simpler term to put it. What do you think that we could do to improve on this situation on a local level?
Well, on a local level, yeah, we're a conservative county, so there's a lot of fighting to do things that might be effective, like birth control and sexual education. At home, with my young person, there's nothing wrong with talking to young kids, and they're going to come home and ask you all kinds of questions, and really dictates how they're going to be at school, right? When they come home and they don't know what teabagging means or anything like that, and they're 12 years old, and you don't want them going to school and misusing those terms. So just at home, I try and straighten that stuff out, but. In our schools here, you're going to see a lot of, what we had one a couple of years ago where we were offering began to offer some services there over at the high school, and there was quite a bit of backlash from it.
Why do you think that there was so much backlash over the push for education, these topics, at least locally?
Again, we're real conservative, and I think a lot of religion doesn't even condone some of the practices of safe sex and contraception and that sort of thing. That's something that we really have to work on, because when you have less unwanted children, you end up with less crime. So it really is something that we would be well positioned to work on as a community.
Yeah, one thing that's especially troubling about this is that the lack of support. Once you have a young girl who's pregnant, with her boyfriend or whatever, there was very little education, very little resources offered to prevent that situation. But then there's very little aid offered after the situation's in place. For example, like no maternal leave, so on. Very little, what's the word I'm trying to look for here? It's on the tip of my tongue. There's very little assistance provided to these people that need it most from a system that failed them by providing the education previous, if that makes sense. It's almost like, a Band-Aid solution again, where they're trying to avoid talking about these sort of things with their families. And then these things happen, but they don't want to, promote them by giving them these resources and whatnot. It's a very unfortunate
You guys
situation.
probably know more about this than I do. What resources are available?
At least on a local level, the most that I've ever seen was, the good old talk about, don't be silly, wrap your willy in health class, along with, the one mandatory condom that they hand out. That's about the most, safe sex promoting stuff that I ever received in high school. I mean, of course, it's very important to get this information, from your family or whatever, if not from high school.
Right.
But that's sort of the thing here, is that it's not provided, at least typically, on such a, public level, because it's such an awkward topic for many parents to talk about with their kids.
I think not just in public schools, but at continuation schools like Sunset and McCarthy, there should be some more support at those institutions. A lot of times when a girl gets pregnant and she's going to Del Norte High, she has to transfer over to Sunset just because the class load is lighter and it's just an atmosphere that's favorable towards women that are young women that are pregnant. But that school doesn't have any kind of no counselors on site that can help you get through your pregnancy. No resource guides there. But with the emergence of Coastal Connections, and I'm on the Coastal Connections Youth Council, there's all sorts of parenting classes and AOD classes. So there are things out there, but I think that's the problem, is that they're out there and they're not in here with us.
So you're not, you wouldn't see it. There's not an office where you go for these resources at the schools. Right?
Yeah, I don't know where it is, if it's there.
Since we're just a little bit short on time, I want to get to one last question here. I'm just going to read it directly from the paper. What would you do to build a safer, more inclusive, and more welcoming Del Norte for our local LGBTQ population?
I would recognize their successes. When we have a civil rights point in history that's worth recognizing, we would recognize it. So when our Supreme Court backed gay weddings, we should have recognized that at a county level here to be supportive of our neighbors, but also the civil rights movement that's still happening today,
I think that somewhat ties back in our county recognizing that success to Del Norte being a mostly conservative county, as you previously mentioned. It sort of does not conflict, but it's a little bit of a polarizing topic amongst politics. At least it was at the time. Still is to a large extent nowadays. It is a very difficult one to address at such a very frank local level when it comes to people talking to people, not governments passing ordinances.
Unfortunately, prejudices, it's something where you have to have understanding to overcome them. So you have to, when we have people that hold prejudices, that's what changes it. If you have a family member that, challenges that, or a friend, but it's up to our leaders to be in that group that that's going to challenge, the way we're doing things, Yeah, I was kind of blown away too. They recognize all kinds of weird topics and,
It's National Seagull Day.
Yeah, that kind of hit me too. But nobody's going to have the political mojo to, step up and
legalize seagull marriage or whatever.
It's a slippery slope. It's seagull shit everywhere.
Last question for you, just before we run out of time. Domestic violence is a very big issue in Del Norte County. What do you think that you would do to solve this issue? Not that it can ever be fully solved, but what steps did you take to raise awareness, prevention, so on?
People do need, like you say, resources. There's people that have anger problems, and of course they need to find their resources, but. This is something where you kind of see it happening, and people don't speak up.
Just raising awareness, even it seems.
We need to recognize where our ills are. To be honest, people who use alcohol are much more likely to engage in domestic abuse. But that is an issue that that we probably can't solve. There's a lot of drinkers, but that would be I believe that would be a step. Is recognizing that alcohol is playing a role in these problems.
Sort of going back to one of the pillars of your campaign thus far, I always joke with my friends and family that one reason I'm so in favor of legalization of cannabis is that I would rather see people stoned than drunk. When people get drunk, they might drive and kill somebody or beat their wife and kids. A lot of the time when somebody gets high, they'll just, eat a
they just forget they're in a car in the first place.
Yeah, they eat a lot of their snacks and sit on a couch for 6 hours at a time. It very much has less damning side effects.
Kind of expanding a bit on that, it's something funny that I saw in the news a while ago. Is the list goes on with a lot of violent things that happen as a result of being under the influence of alcohol. But I think the worst thing I've ever seen as a result of cannabis was I saw an article that a man called his local police saying that he called the police complaining that he was too high, and the cops found him up to his neck in Cheetos.
Living the dream, baby.
I almost died once because there was a delicious orange, and you know how bad fruit is up here. Produce, we don't get that great of produce. So we had a delicious orange, and I was eating it, and there was almost a marijuana death because I choked on it, and I was gasping for air. It was such a delicious orange,
That's kind of one of those situations where you're saying, spoons made me fat. I don't think it was directly a result.
Was it?
Yeah. I think anybody could choke on a perfectly
Probably
delicious
more than with the
orange.
orange.
Robin
I guess.
Williams had one of those. His yeah, right. Yeah, you guys know. No. Yeah.
All right, well, I think that just about wraps everything up. This has been a very special interview with Robert DeRego. Thank you so much for joining us.